All right. Welcome to Salem Grace. I love church. I love coming. Didn't our band do a great job? I tell you, I love I know I say that, but I think one of the things that we're trying to do, and we're trying to play with the service order a little bit as we do things our purpose, but we really just want to try to give you that opportunity when we worship, to worship like you want to worship, and to have that uninterrupted by announcements or offering or anything. So you're going to see that a little bit, and as we go through the next few weeks, I'm excited about what God is doing in our church and what God is doing in the community of Salem, and I'm excited to be your pastor, and I'm just excited. Just excited about everything. But anyway, hey, we've been going through, and if you haven't, if your first time here, we've been going through a sermon series called Home Run, and we've been walking around kind of the bases, of the baseball bases, and we talked about home plate being our relationship with our God and connecting there and how everything starts and ends there. And then first base we covered, which was about our personal character, and second base was, really our relationships with one another. And so now we're rounding third. So we're coming around third, and we are in scoring position. And so usually when you round third, you're about to score. So that's what we really want to talk about this morning, is about our life and what that looks like and what success looks like in our life. And I think sometimes if you were to Google, and I did it this week, if you were to go out and just Google the most successful people, and you Googled that, and you looked at what was there and what was the most successful, who were the most successful people, what you'll find is that typically when the results come back, you will see that most always you'll get a list of people who have been really, really successful in business, who have made a ton of money, or who have been very successful in sports, or they're famous, or they've done this or that, and typically, most always, that success and how we define that success in our world is really around people who have been successful from a financial standpoint, or they're famous or whatever. And what's interesting to me is that you will never see people listed. When you Google, you're not going to get most successful. Here's Trent Ice, because he's been married for 20 some years and he has great kids and he's a pastor. How many is it, honey? Let me back up. They're all blissful, they just all run together. But you won't find that. You won't find that. She probably couldn't tell you either. I won't fool you. No, but you won't find individuals' names listed there. You're not going to see, here's Joe Blow because he's been married for 25 years. He's got 3 great kids. He worked a job for this long, and he paid his mortgage, and he paid his bills, and he was just average Joe. You're not going to find that. Or he walked with Christ every day in his life. He didn't have much, but he walked with Christ. When you Google, you're not going to find people like that. Because I think in our world, in our society, and in our minds, we judge success differently than how God judges it. And so the point I want to try to make as we round third this week and we talk about what success and what results look like in our life, I want you to remember, you will never have a home, or you can never measure a home run life by the world's standards. God judges our home run life differently than we do. And so I want you to keep in that mind. So I think some of you are thinking, okay, well, does God not think that, is God anti-success, or is he against that? Absolutely not. And I think we have scriptures in the Bible that tell us differently. He loves things to grow, and he loves for people to be successful. But I think that how we measure it and how he measures it are two different things. And so the first thing I want you to understand about this measure of success, and as we round third and we look at what success looks like in our life, I want you to understand that God likes to grow things. When you look at Scripture, and if you're a brand new Christian and you've never opened the Bible, if you turn to the first page of the Bible, you're going to read, in the beginning, God created heavens and earth. You're going to read that, and it's very right there. That's the first thing you're going to read if you start at the beginning and go to the back. But what's interesting, and if you continue to read through Genesis, in the first part of Genesis and through those first few verses, that's hard to say, first few verses, you'll find that he loves to grow things. And Genesis 1, chapter 11 through 12 says this: Then God said, let the land sprout with vegetation, every sort of seed-bearing plant and trees that grow seed-bearing fruit. These seeds will then produce all kinds of plants and trees from which they came, and that is what happened. The land produced vegetation. All sorts of seed-bearing plants and trees with seed-bearing fruit. Their seeds produced plants and the trees of the same kind, and God saw that it was good. God has a green thumb, people, and he's good at it. He loves to grow things. He loves to see things grow. Several weeks ago, I talked about my little apple tree. You remember my little apple tree? Some of you are here heard my little apple tree. I have this little apple tree. Picked an apple off of it while I was mowing this week and ate it. It was awesome. Love to grow things. I love to see things grow and bear fruit. And that's really, when we look at the physical life, really, Pastor Mark did a lesson on growing and that type of thing. But when you think about growth, and this was interesting to me when I was pulling this message together this week, physical growth is the only thing that's automatic. Have you ever thought about that? Your physical growth, our physical growth, is the only thing in our life that's automatic. Like when a little baby's born and we show the little picture of the little baby on and everybody claps and you're a little baby, you begin to grow. If you're nurtured and you're cared for and you're given food and people take care of you, you will grow. We can't stop it. Some of us are still growing, out and up. We continue to grow. But, at some point in time, you reach the level of growth. But physically, we grow up. Right? That's the only thing that's automatic. Every other part of growth in our life, every other part of growth that happens in our life, whether it's intellectually, through school, or financial growth, or our physical well-being, every other type of growth that we do is a choice. And it's something that is not automatic. It's optional. We have to determine if we're willing to grow in a certain area and if we're willing to put forth the effort. When you look at, you go to school, you got to be willing to go to school and learn and grow your mind. And, if you go to the gym and you want to get huge, you got to grow. You got to go, you got to put the effort in. And you have to do that. And so when we think about our spiritual life and what that looks like for growth and success looks like for our growth, some of us want that. We want to achieve that growth, and some of us achieve it faster than others. We all grow at different paces. And so one of the things, and this is interesting, when we look at success and when you look at the business world, I think sometimes when you come out of college and you get a degree, much like myself, when I came out of college and I got that degree, I thought, okay, let the offers begin. Come to me, people, I have a degree. And I really thought the phone was just going to say, hey, we heard Trent got a degree. We want you. It doesn't happen that way. I think sometimes we feel like we want that growth to happen like right away, and we want it to happen. And I think it's the same with our spiritual life. I think sometimes we ask Christ in our life, and we expect to be at a certain level by this certain time, and we want to grow spiritually, and we want to be deep, and we want to do great things for God. But sometimes I think God has a different plan for us. And so we ask ourselves the question, how long does it take not to get to the Tootsie Roll and the Tootsie Pop? Sorry, just running a commercial. How many licks? No. How long does it take for us to grow into a mature Christian? What does that look like? What's that time frame look like? And so Malcolm Gladwell, whoever he is, but I was in my research, I found him. He suggests that people at the top of their profession require 10,000 hours of learning to develop their skills. 10,000 hours. Like I was doing the math on that. I was like, 8 hours a day, 4 hours a week, divide that. If you think about that, that's what he said. Typically, for people to get to some level of success in the business world or in their career or whatever they're doing, it generally takes about 10,000 hours for you really to get a grip and get to a level of success with that career and that understanding. And so that's interesting. So you think, well, I need that spiritually? But I think what happens is the Bible tells us that it's different for all of us in our spiritual growth, primarily due to how we receive the message. and what we do with it. And there's a parable that Jesus told in Matthew chapter 13. It's the parable of the sower. It's a guy sowing seeds, and you're throwing seeds out there, and some of it grows and some of it doesn't. So I want to read that real quick. It says this, Matthew chapter 13, 4 through 8 says this. As he scattered them across the field, some seeds fell on a footpath, and birds came and ate them. Other seeds fell on shallow soil with underlying rock. The seeds sprouted quickly because the soil was shallow, but the plants soon wilted under the hot sun, and since they didn't have deep roots, they died. Other seeds fell among thorns that grew up and choked out tender plants. Still other seeds fell on fertile soil and produced a crop that was 30, 60, and even 100 times as much as been planted. And so we hear that parable, and Jesus is talking to a group of people, and he's telling them this parable. And if you've been around the church even a little bit, you've probably heard a message on that. You've probably heard people talk about that. Well, some seed, and what does that look like? And I think what that looks like, and some of you may be here this morning going, you know what, I've never heard that story before. I don't know what that means. I don't know what he's talking about. Sowing seeds, I don't get how that works with church. Well, let me tell you, here's how it is. Our growth, and God loves to grow things, and if we want to be successful in our spiritual life and in our personal lives, it's dependent upon what kind of soil you are. So I want you to ask yourself this morning, and I think when I look across this room this morning, I have to believe that some of us are probably rocky soil. Some of us are, we come once, or we've had a relationship at some point in time in our life, and we think, oh, I want to do great things. I want to be a Christian. I want to do awesome. I want to be a Christian. I'm going to be a Christian forever. And then we grow a little bit, and then as soon as the sun comes out, because we don't have deep roots, and we've not spent the time growing and learning and reading the Bible and developing a relationship with God, first time something hard comes along, we're off the wagon. We fall off the wagon. Some of us in here are fertile. Some of us in here, somebody planted a seed at some point in time in our life, and it's stuck, and it's growing, and it continues to grow, and it grows every day. And every day we get a little bit stronger, and we're listening, and we're praying, and we're doing God's will, and we're trying to be walking His light, and we're trying to do the things that He wants us to do. Some of us get choked out by the thorns. Some of us have a bunch of garbage in our life. Some of us have friends that we don't need to be friends with, and we need to find new friends. And some of us have things pressures in life and things that go in our life. But wherever you are in that journey and growth, and whatever kind of soil you are, our growth, your growth, my growth, depends on where we're at. So where are you this morning, church? Do you want to be successful? Do you want to round third? Do you want to have a home run life? Then make sure your roots are deep. Put the time and commitment. The other thing about growth that I'll just share real quickly before I move on, I have found that when I go to the gym, and I've kind of been going to the gym a little bit here in the last year or so. I haven't been lately because I've been too busy. But when I go, and especially like if I go and I haven't been for a while, and then somebody like John Bunnell talks me into doing leg day, and I have to do squats, I cannot walk for the next week. Literally, like when I see a set of stairs, I want to cry. I'm like, oh, please God, no. It's like, because it hurts so bad. And you tear down those muscles and you break them down. But you know that even growing up, when you have, we have growing pains, right? You hear people talk about they're growing pains. My legs hurt. When I grew up, when I was a teenager, I had really bad feet. And my arches fell when I was a kid, and really, really painful. So like when you get out of the pool and you walk on the sidewalk and you have that little curve for your arch, I don't have that. I've got like duck feet print. But it was painful. I can remember I got these huge bruises on the bottom of my feet when my arches fell, and it was really painful. It was just part of growing up. Some people have it. But sometimes we all go through different things, and we have different pain, and growth typically is painful. And so we have to be willing to endure some of that. And I think that God's desire is that each of us grow. He's a God that loves to see things grow. He loves fertile soil. I think the second thing that we need to wrap our head around is that we need to learn how to make, once we've decided to grow and we've accepted Christ and we're ready to grow and we're ready to be used by God, we need to learn what it's like to make others successful. So you're looking at me and go, okay, what does that look like? What do you mean I need to make somebody else successful? And I think in our society, we are typically it's about me type of thing. What can I do to make myself successful? But I've been talking over the last couple weeks about Joseph, and we've talked a little bit about Joseph and Jacob, and Jacob, and Joseph was this son that really got sold into slavery. We talked about him a little last week. He was the favorite son of Jacob, and his brothers were mad at him because he was cocky, and they sold him into slavery. But all through, that was a journey for Joseph, and it was all about him growing and taking the next step to get a little bit closer, and what that looks like to get closer and closer to God, and having him work through difficult times, painful things in his life. I have to believe that when he was in a pit and his brothers literally sold him into slavery, that was not a good time. I have to believe that Joseph was like, man, God, I can't believe you're doing this to me. It's painful. And all through that, but what's interesting, if you read through the story of Joseph, and I want to point out three things in Joseph's life. The first one was when he got sold into slavery. So one thing that he did, and this is in actually Genesis chapter 39, verses 2 through 4, it talks about Joseph at Potiphar's house. And so what happened to Joseph, if you're not familiar with the story, his brothers were mad at him, they sold him into slavery. Then these people that took him, and they sold him to Potiphar. This guy named Potiphar bought him as a slave for his house. You're going to work for me, I bought you, I own you, type of thing. That cannot be a good place for Joseph. But Joseph had made a determination, I believe, in his heart and mind that whatever he did, he was going to do it for the glory of God. So whether you're going out, and I know some of you are probably, you're in this job that you hate, or you're doing things in your life, you're like, man, is this really all that God has for me? I think some of us get to that point, and we're like, man, there's got to be more to this. I can't believe I don't have it. Some of you may not have a job. Some of us are wrestling with, man, I can't believe I'm at this point in my life. And we're wrestling with that. And I want you to look. In Genesis 39, 2 through 4, it says, the Lord was with Joseph. And this is when he was at Potiphar's house. So he succeeded in everything he did as he served the home of Egyptian master. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. This pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph his personal attendant, and he put him in charge of his entire household and everything he owned. So Joseph was sold into a slave. He made a determination that he was like, I'm going to serve God. I'm going to do whatever I do. I'm going to do the very best that I can do because that's what God would want me to do. And he had success. I mean, he went from slave to, okay, I'm running the place. So you would think at that point in time, Joseph is probably thinking, okay, thank you, God. I've kind of made it. I'm doing well. I appreciate what you've done for me. It all goes south again. You ever had that in life? Have you ever had a moment where things are going, you feel like you've kind of made it finally through the fog, and then it goes south again? You ever been there? Joseph was, it says that in the Bible that he was a very strapping man and very attractive, much like myself. Maybe not. I've got a shirt of many colors. But he was a very good-looking dude. And Potiphar's wife said, hey, he's really nice looking. I'm going to make an advance. And what's cool, there's a whole other message here. But so Potiphar's wife tried to get him to sleep with her. And he said, immediately when she said it, he was like, oh no, and he was out. Like he bolted. The Bible said he ran. And there's a whole other message on temptation there. But when we're faced with that, he bolted and ran. He left his coat in the process, though. He ran out so fast he left his coat. Well, then Potiphar's wife made this big deal and accused him of trying to sleep with her and seduce her. And he's like, whoa, wait a minute. That's not how it went down. But it didn't matter. And Potiphar had him thrown in prison. So here he is again. He finds himself back in prison doing time for something that he didn't do. And so you look at where he's at in prison in Genesis chapter 39. So you would think maybe at this point in time he's been sold into slavery. He rose above that and accomplished something, and then he fell back. Now he finds himself back in the the ditch again. And you would think maybe at this point in time he's like, okay, God, I give up. I've had it. I'm not done. Nope, not Joseph. Chapter 39:22, it says this: before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and everything that happened in the prison. If you read back, Joseph begins to minister in the prison. He begins to tell people what their dreams mean and begins to help people. And the warden's like, man, this is a great guy. We're going to put you in charge of the whole prison. So again, he overcomes that, and he began to rise above that. And then it goes on, because out of prison, he lands himself as the ruler of Egypt. Pharaoh has this dream. Joseph interprets it, and Pharaoh says this to him in chapter 41, 39 through 40. It says this: then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has revealed the meaning of dreams to you, clearly no one else is as intelligent or wise as you are. You will be in charge of my court, and my people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on the throne, will have a higher rank than you. How cool is that? Talk about a Cinderella story. This guy has been sold into slavery, he got falsely accused, he got put in prison, and now he's ruler of Egypt, which, by the way, meant that Potiphar now worked for him. Uh-oh. How awkward. Awkward. Hey, you put me in prison, didn't you? But it's just an amazing story. And I think what we have to learn here is that in each of his positions, each one of those situations, Joseph learned to serve others. He learned to make somebody else successful. He made Potiphar successful. He made the warden successful in Pharaoh's eyes. And then finally, Pharaoh noticed and said, now you're going to have success. You're going to have this promotion. I think when we have a dream or a vision about what God has for us, we want it now. And sometimes we don't feel like, you ever notice this about people too, that sometimes we don't feel like we get enough recognition for our contribution. I've been around the church a long time, my whole life, and I have seen church people, it amazes me. Or they're, it's just like, well, this is what I did. I bought a piano. Well, great, thank you. And that's good. But I think sometimes we want some kind of recognition for our contribution. Joseph wasn't about that. He was just about doing what he did for the glory of God and for making somebody else successful. This process, it doesn't happen overnight. And the point I wanted to make here is that we might miss the future if we skip the process that God desires for us. The challenges that we are facing right now might be preparing you for the future. And some of us are still trying to get there. So whatever it is you're in, whatever issue you're dealing with, or whatever prison or slavery that you're in right now, just understand that God can use that if you allow him to, and you say, and if we're determined to grow, and we're determined to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to do everything that I do, I'm going to do it for the glory of the Lord. And I'm going to give him the credit for it. I don't need credit for it. I want to give God the credit for it. The next thing that, have you ever, let me ask you this. Next thing I want to talk to you about is sometimes we have to, when we're serving God and we want to have success and you want to grow and you want to do things different in your life, and if you want to have success, even as a church, if we want to have a success as a church, I think sometimes we have to look at the way we do things. Let me ask you this. Who in here, I still remember, some of you are going to laugh because you're young, but I can remember when my family, my dad brought home our very first microwave. Does anybody remember your very first microwave? Yeah, it had that big giant dial. Tick, 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 ding. Do you remember that? And they were about the size of the drum set. I remember as a family, we were all standing around watching. We put like a cup of water in it, and we were like, oh, that is awesome. It boiled water in like a minute. We were mind blown, over a microwave. And I can remember, this is funny too, but I can remember when Dad got a weed eater. I loved the weed eater. The greatest. Do you ever remember, some of you won't know, and you kids are so, like we had little hand clippers. Did you ever have those growing up? And Dad would like, go out there and trim the lawn. I mean, you're out there for years. Carpal tunnel. I loved the weed eater. Made it better, made it easier. Remember our first cell phone? I called Cheryl from it. We got our first cell phone. It was the size of luggage. Carried it around in a bag. Had a giant antenna. Remember that? I called Cheryl, and literally it was like, hey, I'm calling you from the car. She's like, you better get off there. I was like, I know, it's really expensive. See ya. It was just so cool. I was talking in the car. It's like I only saw that on Miami Vice. But I think sometimes, and we would never get anywhere in society. I just wonder where we'd be if somebody just, the old ringer phone, everybody said, that's good. It works. It's worked for us for the past. We're not going to improve it. We're good with it. We'd all still be, hello, Sarah? Get me Aunt B. It's very scriptural too, actually. You've heard me talk a lot about David. And one thing we learned about David was that the one story you know about David is what? Goliath, right? Most of us, if you don't, that's okay. But when David was a small boy, he was a shepherd, and he used to kill things in his hands. Actually, 1 Samuel, these are maybe, there are two things, actually. The first thing we know about David is he killed Goliath, right? He killed Goliath with a sling and a stone. He got a stone and put it in a sling, and dink, knocked the guy out and cut his head off. He was good at it. And what I thought, how good can you be? How accurate can you be with a sling, right? I mean, it's like a little piece of string with a rock in it, and you whip it around and let go of it, and a rock flies out. I'm like, that's probably like 1 in a million shot, maybe, But actually, they're very good at it. And in Judges chapter 20, verse 16, it says this: among Benjamin's elite troops, 700 were left-handed, and each of them could sling a rock and hit a target within a hair's breadth without missing. I don't know what a hair's breadth is, but that's probably pretty close. It's pretty accurate. They were good at it. They were marksmen with a sling. David was. He slung that thing and hit the guy right between the eyes and knocked him cold. My point is, if David would have stuck with that, he would have never advanced. So if you continue to read the story of David, he ultimately became the king of Israel. And the sling was good enough for Goliath, but the sling probably wasn't an effective tool against 10,000 raging enemy. And so if you read the story of David and you read through Saul and David and Jonathan, you will learn that David became very, very skilled at using the sword. So at some point in time, somebody said, yeah, David, that whole sling trick, that's good. It's pretty impressive, gotta admit. But you probably need to pick up this because we're moving to the next level here. And so my point is, if we always just hung on to the way things that we always did and do things that we always did because it's comfortable and it's effective, we may have had some success with the way we do church in the past. And I'm just going to be really real with you here this morning. Sometimes in church, we're tempted to hold on to traditions, or we're tempted to hold on to things because that's the way we've always done it. It's comfortable. We've had success with it. We slung a rock around and hit a few people and got a few people saved, and it's been successful. But I think if we want to continue to grow, and you can apply this with everything in your life. As a bank, I told the first service, I was a banker. Most of you know that. I've been at the bank for 22, it would be 23 years in November. And I started at the bank as a part-time teller. I remember Dennis Rubin, I went and interviewed for the job. It was a part-time job, and he said, you know, Trent, he's like, we like your resume. We like you. We think you're going to do great things. And he said, we normally start our tellers out at $5 an hour. And I thought, okay, here it comes. And he said, but since you have your degree, we're going to start you at $5.50 an hour. And I said, yes. I knew that $40,000 college education that I just had paid for had finally paid off. And I was about to reap all of its benefits. But I think sometimes what I learned is, and I told that story, I think sometimes when you're in college, you think you come out of college and somebody's just going to hand you this, oh, here you go, here's $100,000, knock yourself out, you're awesome. And that may happen to some of us, but realistically in our spiritual life, it takes growth. And it took growth in my life. It took me 22 years to get to the position where I'm at now at the bank so I could quit. Yay! But my point is, throughout my career, I had to learn different skills. There were things that I learned different skills. I learned how to, the finance piece of it. And, I had to learn how to read, spreadsheets. And I had to learn how to read financial statements. And I had to look at people's tax returns. And I had to learn different skill sets. And I had to learn how to, eventually I got to manage some people. And I had to learn what it was like to manage people. I couldn't do things that I'd always done because I wouldn't have success. And David was the same way. And David actually was kind of reluctant to it as, when we're faced with that, 1 Samuel chapter 17, 34 through 35, it says, but David persisted. I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goats, he said. When a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from my flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. He was literally catching animals and clubbing them to death with his hand as a boy. But he progressed from that. He moved up. He had to put down the sling, and he had to pick up the sword. And I think sometimes if we want to experience success, and round third base, we have to learn to reinvent ourselves from time to time. As a church, as individuals, we have to be willing to look at ourselves and go, you know what? You're right. I've been slinging the sling when I should have been swinging the sword. I got to learn how to reach people. I got to learn new things. I got to learn how to put myself out there. It's uncomfortable. It's painful. It's not an easy process. I got to step out of my comfort zone. I have to quit my job at 22 years and pastor a church. It's not easy. But we learn a different skill, and God can use us. David had to be willing to learn and do the training he needed to learn to do his job. And I think some of us, maybe you've mastered a skill and you continue to be comfortable with that. My question for you this morning is, are you willing, and I want you to think about this question, are you willing to give up what is comfortable for you to reach this community for Christ? And I want you to think about that. Even as church. Are we willing to, because sometimes I think we come to church and we're like, okay, I want it to be about me. I want church to be about me. I want to sing the songs that I like, and I want to do the things that I want to do, and I want to sit in my same seat, and I want to talk to the same people that I want to talk to, and I want to, I don't want to go out of my, that's just not comfortable for me. I'm just not comfortable doing that. Step out of your comfort zone, folks. Learn a new skill. And that, Cheryl talked about the Kazone class, and that's not something you order at DiMaggio's. I'll have the Kazone, please. It's a class that will help us identify our spiritual gifts, and it will help you learn a new tool that you have in your arsenal to reach people for Christ. And the last thing I'll just tell you about this is growth always requires hard decisions. And there are 4 things that I want to cover just real quick. If you want to succeed in life, and it doesn't necessarily always have to be at church, just in life in general, you're going to have to do those things. You're going to have somebody be willing to tell you, hey, you need to stop doing that, and you need to start doing this. At the bank, we called them went wells and next times. That was warm and fuzzy. This went really well, but next time do this. We got to do that. 4 tips. I want to have the band come up, and they're going to close us with a song, and I want to challenge you this morning. But there's 4 things I want to cover real quick as they're coming up. The first thing, tips to succeeding in life, first thing is bring your gift to the table. Most of us compare ourselves with each other. I look at Brian Ganzow and I go, man, if I could play guitar like that. Or you look at somebody else, or you look at that person sitting next to you, and you look at people in the church, and you go, man, I wish I could just do that. I wish I was like that. We always tend to want gifts that other people have, and we don't focus on what our gift is. What is your gift? Figure out what that is and bring it to the table. I had somebody approach me at first service and said, it was just an idea. Hey, I've had this idea. I think I could be good at this. What do you think? I'm thinking, yes, I like it. Do something. Get involved. Bring your gift to the table. And here's the thing. In Matthew 25:15, parable about the talents, and what a talent is a piece of money, and it's a story about a master who was getting ready to leave and go on a business trip, and he left his money to some of his servants. And he said this, and he gave each one of them these bags of silver, but he didn't give them all the same bag. Matthew 25:15 says this, he gave 5 bags of silver to one, 2 bags of silver to another, and 1 bag of silver to the last, dividing it in proportion to their abilities. If I'm the last guy in line, I got the 1 bag. I'm like, what? I got 1 bag? He got 5. We tend to compare ourselves. God has given each one of you a gift to use. May not be 5 gifts, may not be 2, may just be 1. But each one of you have something. So bring your gift to the table. Secondly, don't let your failure be final. And what that looks like is you will fail in life. Don't let that be final. What you do, it's not about the failure, it's what you do with the second chances. We talked when we were headed around, one of the bases about making errors. We all make them. Nobody plays an error-free game, people. Third thing, if you want to have success, earn your keep. Ooh, there's a touchy one. What's that look like? More and more people think somebody owes them something. And I'm blown away by people how they, it's kind of like me coming out of college, I thought somebody owed me a job. It's not about somebody owes you. Do something. Do it for the glory of God, for His purpose. Don't just come in here on Sunday. You want to be a part of this church? You want to feel something awesome? You want to have a home run life? Start doing something for God. Get engaged. You will never feel more full. I've never been more full in my life. It's been a great job. I've had a great career, but there's nothing more rewarding than an opportunity of sharing Jesus Christ with somebody. I guarantee you won't regret it. Explore, earn your keep. We want to be places of honor. We want to sit in places of honor. In Mark chapter 10:37, this is the disciples talking to Jesus, and they said, hey, when you sit in your glorious throne, we want to sit in places of honor next to you, one on your right and the other on left. So they're telling him, hey, Jesus, when you're going out and you're sitting somewhere, we want to be there with you. We want to be sitting there. We want to be sitting in that place of honor. We want to be sitting at the lead table. But then Jesus said to him, in verse 38, he says, you don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink from the bitter cup of suffering that I'm about to drink? And are you able to be baptized with the baptism of suffering that I must be baptized with? I want you to know that when you jump in and you want a place of honor with Jesus and you want to sit there, it's going to be painful. There are going to be parts that are going to be painful. Our growth process is always painful. There will be hard decisions that you have to make. The last thing is the last point. So there's 3 things. Bring your talent to the table. Don't let your final be final. Earn your keep. And the 4th thing is have a funeral and get a new dream. Some of us have dreams. I had dreams about what my life would look like after, we were going to retire. Cheryl and I are going to move to Florida. We're going to sell our kids and abandon them. We've already told them, when we get retirement, you're going to have to find us. We're going to be somewhere in the country. I don't know where we'll be. We have dreams. We have plans for our lives. And sometimes God has a different plan for us. And then what we have to do, instead of sulking and crying about our dream that's been broken, have a funeral for that dream and get a new one. You want to be part of God's plan? You want to have a home run life? Get a dream that's in line with his dream for your life. Make that your dream. Stand with us this morning. I'm going to have Greg just sing this song. I think, church, we've been around the bases. It's about success. It's about results. It's about growing. It's about beginning to reap what God has for us. I'm excited. In a couple of weeks, I want to share with you our vision of our church and where we want to go and what we want to do. I've got a ton of good ideas. I don't know if they're good. They're ideas. I've got a ton of ideas. I know people are talking to me, and there's just a buzz in our church, and I'm excited to be at Salem Grace. I'm excited about what we can do in the community of Salem to reach people. And if you want to get on that bus, get on it, because it's going to be a fun ride. I'm going to get rid of our old dreams. Not that our old dreams are bad. I just want to make sure that our dream is in vision with God's dream. So in the coming weeks, I'll be sharing what that looks like. So pray for our church. Continue to pray for our staff. I'm going to pray for you guys that God will begin to challenge each and every one of you to figure out what your gift is and bring it to the table so that we can all have a part in that.